image appeared. He was shown to be under the protection of the sun's rays. While previous pharaohs were depicted as being physically perfect, Akhenaten instructed the royal artisans to picture him more realistically. Instead of looking like a warrior, his statues portrayed him as feminine. And he was seen being tender with his children or in poses with Nefertiti that would have seemed far too intimate just a few years before. Akhenaten and Nefertiti ruled together for 12 years, and then, curiously, there is no record of the queen after that. The disappearance of Nefertiti is one of the great mysteries of Akhenaten's reign. After being such an integral part of her husband's kingship, almost a co-regent, suddenly there are no more mentions or depictions of her to be found. The reasons for this are still in debate. Some believe she may have died during childbirth. At one time, it was believed she was indiscreet in some way and Akhenaten disposed of her. Still, others suggest that she lived on past Akhenaten's interest in the sun. Nefertiti could have, in fact, been the more devout of the two and cloistered herself away to remain loyal to the cult of the Aten.
But the basic situation seems to be that she actually died. And there is evidence that she was buried in the royal tomb at Amarna, in what is called the royal wadi, beyond the confines of the royal city.
In any case, Akhenaten did not have to suffer from a lack of companionship. He appointed a new male co-ruler. His name was Smenkhara, and some believe he may have been the pharaoh's younger brother.
It is possible that he married one or more of his daughters. If he did that, that would not actually be unusual for a pharaoh. But in the case of Akhenaten, we also have a suggestion that he had a homosexual relationship with his co-ruler, Smenkhara, towards the end of his reign, which would make Akhenaten one of the first bisexual people, presumably, since he also has children from Nefertiti.
His unorthodox appearance and descent from the old religion caused history to label him a heretic. Still, there is little evidence that the pharaoh Akhenaten's new sun cult ever really took hold among ordinary people. Excavations of the ancient city of Akhenaten have revealed that even before his death, many of the inhabitants kept idols of the old gods in their homes. Were they ignoring the new religion, or did they sense the inevitable? Akhenaten's religion was failing. Akhenaten died in 1334 BC, during the 17th year of his reign, and with him died his religion, based on the worship of the sun disk. Soon after, there was a tremendous backlash against his religion and heresy, which led to the destruction of anything that bore his name. It is believed, however, that in order to protect his remains, Akhenaten's followers removed his body from its tomb at Amarna.
It was an Egyptian custom to gather together and to try to hide and conceal and protect for the future the remains of important pharaohs and burials. And I think there's a strong possibility that that's what did happen, and it remains to be discovered for archaeologists in the future.
With the heretic Akhenaten dead, Egypt prayed for a strong pharaoh to restore its faith and reassure its people. Instead, this burden fell upon a boy just 10 years old. Behind the great cliffs of Dar el-Bahari, in the mountains west of Thebes, lies a golden landscape formed in primordial times, when floodwaters from the Nile cut through the earth, leaving a series of gullies and dry stream beds called wadis. It is within these canyons, in a place known as the Valley of the Kings, that the Egyptians of the New Kingdom buried their departed pharaohs. It was here, on a balmy afternoon in 1922 AD, that a modern-day discovery saved the legacy of a minor pharaoh from being lost in the sands of time. From evidence recovered, it was learned that this king, named Tutankhamun, was the son of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten. This may explain why so little was known of Tutankhamun before this finding. When the Egyptians tried to erase the memory of Akhenaten, they may have also tried to erase the memory of his son. The list of kings inscribed on the walls at Abydos curiously omits Tutankhamun's name along with Akhenaten's. This has led scholars to ponder the question, who was the pharaoh Tutankhamun? He was born and raised in Akhenaten's capital city at Amarna. His birth name was Tutankhaten, which meant living image of the sun god. But with the death of his father, the old religious beliefs and the cult of Amun were reinstated. Accordingly, he removed the Aten from the end of his name and replaced it with Amun to become the legendary boy king Tutankhamun. His new name meant image of the god of life. Artifacts exist which depict him as a robust king attacking Nubian and Syrian enemies. But experts believe it's unlikely that young Tutankhamun was ever actually involved in any military campaigns. Such responsibilities were probably handled by an experienced general named Horemheb. He was an ambitious warrior. Inscriptions identify him as commander-in-chief of the army and deputy of the king. Horemheb had served as military commander for the two pharaohs that preceded Tutankhamun. It was his mission to reassert Egypt's military might and restore respect from its neighbors. Were there others in this boy king's court that also wielded great power? It seems that a boy suddenly thrust upon the throne of a great empire would need senior officials for advice and guidance. The question is, was Tutankhamun just a puppet for the real power behind the throne? Perhaps the answer lies with a member of King Tutankhamun's court who overshadows everyone else. He was the king's vizier and high priest called I. A skilled and determined civil servant, his name meant Divine Father. Scholars believe it is I, along with Horemheb, who were responsible for the stability of Egypt during this time.
Horemheb and I, between them, are adherents to the ancient god Amun. It is they, principally, who discard this new religion of the Aten, and the court and the religious focus is moved back to ancient Thebes, modern Luxor. Although, of course, naturally, all the inscriptions extol the virtues of Tutankhamun, but of course, it's the bureaucrats, the civil servants, the general Horemheb, the high priest I, who are essentially running the country, rubber stamping everything.
To what extent any pharaoh was involved in the day-to-day business of foreign and domestic affairs still puzzles experts. Egypt had a fully developed bureaucracy of administrators and scribes. The pharaoh was a figurehead, both royal and religious. Tutankhamun, like the other kings before him, had much of his life orchestrated around certain routines and ceremonies designed to reinforce his stature.
The king as a person is hedged around with royal symbolism. He has people watching him from the moment he gets up to the time he goes to bed. So to a great extent, his life is simply circumscribed by that. You might have found state affairs, in fact, quite onerous, putting on those heavy crowns and all that regalia, and look forward to the time that he could simply take them off and go off and play with his friends.
Tutankhamun had a queen. She was 2 years older than he was. It appears Akhenaten was the father of both. This made the pharaoh's bride also his half-sister.
Her name was Akhenaten. We do know that she was very important to him. They were married when they were fairly young. From the representations, we see that she sits nearby him. She seems to take an active interest in some of the things that he was doing in hunting and fowling and fishing.
With the old religion of many gods now reinstated, the reign of King Tutankhamun seemed destined to be a period of rebirth and renewal for Egypt. But then, at about the age of 20, the young pharaoh suddenly died. Some believe he was murdered. Forensic analysis of his mummy shows that he died of damage to his cranial cavity. This suggests a blow to the head. Further examination reveals a small hole in his skull. Scholars have constructed theories as to how it got there.
One is that he was thrown from his chariot, but that seems highly unlikely because of the nature of the damage to the skull. Others that someone crept upon him in the night and thrust a small pointed object into the brain and therefore did away with him in a silent and stealthy manner, and still others that he might have died of a cerebral hemorrhage.
Was there a conspiracy to murder the pharaoh? Some believe the damage to Tutankhamun's skull didn't occur until after he was dead.
It is known for a fact that embalmers were not very careful. And there have been evidences of spare legs that are in coffins, and in some cases, in order to make sure that an individual fit into the coffin, then the toes were cut off. In Tutankhamun's case, it's also clear that the embalmers were not very careful. So my guess is that the damage that was done to the skull was probably the embalmer's fault and not a cause of death.
The short reign and sudden death of the young king did not allow enough time to finish a proper royal tomb. This is probably the reason that his burial site ended up hidden from plunderers through the ages. The entrance had been obscured by rock chips dumped during the cutting of a later king's tomb. The treasures found in Tutankhamun's tomb have awed the modern world. Up until their discovery, men could only imagine how Egypt's once brilliantly colored temples and artifacts would have appeared in ancient times. The contents of the young pharaoh's tomb reveal the true opulence and splendor of the era. But were the riches chosen to accompany this relatively minor ruler into eternity only a hint of what had been buried in the tombs of the truly great pharaohs? Some historians have suggested that we should not assume the larger tombs were filled with even more treasure. The pharaoh Tutankhamun's burial may have been richer than most. The people may have been grateful to him for the restoration of the old religion. Or there might have been an emotional outpouring for someone that died so young. The untimely passing of the king not only caught the royal tomb builders unprepared, but it left Egypt once again without an heir to the throne. Sadly, there is evidence the young royal couple tried to perpetuate their bloodline. 2 mummified fetuses were found in Tutankhamun's tomb that are almost certainly the remains of stillborn daughters. Although it is only a theory, some experts speculate that inbreeding may have been one of the many factors, including disease, politics, and warfare, which contributed to the decline of other kingdoms. In Tutankhamun's case, inbreeding may have rendered his children too frail to survive. With no heir in line to inherit the kingship,